despite opposition both within and outside his caucus, Prime Minister Mark Carney's bill to expedite big projects in the so-called national interest with new and expanded powers for cabinet is on track to pass the House this week, less than a month after it was first introduced. The Prime Minister got Conservative support in the House of Commons for that fast tracking. How will the strategy play out for him in the government? Let's bring in our front bench to talk about that. Sharon Carr is former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Jamie Ellerton is a Conservative strategist and the founder and principal of Canaptus. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Bélanger is with us. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. And rounding us out tonight, Hannah Thibodeau is a former news anchor. She's now an executive communications officer at Global Public Affairs. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. Sharon, I'll start with you. I get the economic imperative that the government is spelling out. I understand how they think that there's a lot of Canadian support for what they're trying to do at a high level. But this is really fast, and I feel like there's definitely, genuine opposition to the process.
And yes, you know what, there is going to be. What I would say, though, is that it takes too long in some cases, and now it's a little bit too fast. Are they going to have to maybe somehow find a way to get to a place where it's a little bit longer? I don't think that's going to be possible at this point, but we are in a place where things don't get built in this country. I can speak from experience, having worked for the company that tried to build the Energy East pipeline and the Keystone pipeline, and the number of consultations that I have gone to that led to nowhere but billions of sunk dollars. It's really material. So there's going to be opposition, but for center-leaning liberals like myself, I actually like this bill because I'm tired of seeing things take forever to get done. So I'm all for building infrastructure. Let's be respectful while we do it to communities. But people are going to have to adapt and adjust to the timeline. And if we expect to advance as a country and get stuff done, so be it.
It's a big shift for the Liberals, Carl, if you think from both a policy and political perspective. First of all, it feels like this is just like a disguise for repealing C-69. They won't say it unequivocally, but like that is basically what this bill does. But politically even, the dance partner has completely changed from the NDP and at times the Bloc to, in this instance, it is the Conservatives unequivocally who are helping them not only get the bill passed, but ultimately fast-tracked.
And Nathan Erskine-Smith was right that if the Poilievre Conservative or the Harper Conservatives had brought in this kind of bill, the Liberals would be screaming bloody murder about all of this because it is a power grab. It's the kind of thing that happens when the Blue Liberals take control of that party. You see their real conservative leaning, they're shifting to the right, they're grabbing power as they can, and all in the name of national interest without it being defined. So it's really, up to the ministers, up to the prime ministers to decide what's of national interest. And, the communities can just listen. No, they don't need even to listen. They just need to shut up. And these things will be built no matter what. And this is why I think it's dangerous and a slippery slope. But they are allowed to do that because the opposition is weakened. You have a weakened Conservative Party without a leader in the House, and the Bloc has gone down, and the NDP doesn't have official party status, so they feel like they can rush these things, that they have the mandate to do it. You see it also with Bill C-2 on the border, and they'll keep doing it until they can't.
I think, Jamie, to sort of counter that, and I understand exactly what Carl is spelling out, it was the genesis of much of my challenge to Minister McKinnon. At the same time, he makes a fair point in that if the Conservatives are helping them move this through and do believe in basically what the intention behind it is, that is reflective of the vast majority of Canadians, right? 85% of them approximately who cast a vote for either of those parties.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even some of the opposition you're seeing, I would say it's almost has a feel of usual suspects who come out and oppose everything always. Whereas when you listen to how the Prime Minister talks about this, it's ultimately the namesake of your show. It's the ultimate power play. He's kind of put into position the power of cabinet to identify big projects, which allows this government, specifically the Prime Minister, who's been its chief negotiator with just about everyone, to be working with the premiers, working with Indigenous leaders, and working with industry to identify projects, to prioritize them and get them through, and empowers the minister to be able to essentially use legislative authority through the stroke of the minister's pen, still held accountable to Parliament, to move things forward. So I know some Conservatives from the kind of the think tank world are talking about how this legislation is imperfect and it puts too much political power into the minister's hands. But ultimately, I think when you look at how you've seen competing visions as to how to try and go about getting stuff built, and stuff's not getting built, as Sharon has already rightly pointed out. This is saying there's going to be politics, so we're going to own the politics, and let's actually try with ongoing real cohesion to get stuff built. And for the 15% of Canadians that are offside, I think you're still going to see high environmental standards upheld. I think there's a basic acknowledgement that modern day engineering can actually truly work wonders. And this isn't the day of the early industrial revolution, the way some of the doom and gloom types and talking and opposing these projects come forward with. And it's clear to Canadians who's ultimately responsible for this. And it's Mark Carney. And I think he feels like he's going to be on the right side on the majority of Canadians and trying to actually get stuff built, as opposed to having endless cycles in Ottawa playing politics with this and seeing nothing get done.
I think, Hannah, that can all be true, but it can also be true that they could be setting themselves up to be stuck in court and actually set back the imperative of building things out. Because although it might be a minority of Canadians who are voicing their concerns right now, many of them are rights holders, right? Or people that the government does have a duty to consult. And I understand Minister McKinnon's point that they're going to do everything and all of it just in a short amount of time. But we have not really seen evidence previously of a government able to do that and not end up in court.
Absolutely. Yeah, in Mr. McKinnon's interview with you, Vashi, the government House leader, he says this is what Canadians voted for. I'm not 100% sure this is exactly what Canadians voted for. Yes, we want to see, I'm speaking as Canadians here, they wanted to see these nation-building projects. They wanted them to move forward faster. However, if you get into the minutiae, which is what we're talking about, they did not agree to giving Cabinet this ultimate power to decide a project without even a study before it gets started. That's environmental study. That's talking, making sure everything is okay with Indigenous leaders. You talk about lawsuits. The Indigenous leaders met in an emergency meeting earlier this week to talk about this. They were told there's going to be an advisory committee, all of those types of things, but they're not even sure how that's going to play out. So there's still so many questions. And if Steve McKinnon, the government House leader, and the Prime Minister are so confident in this, then just say, yes, we are going to do it this way. And this is the reason why, rather than playing politics and trying to skirt around the issues on national television. Admit, yes, we are doing this because we have to make it faster. We have to go from 5 years to 2 years. So just be honest with what you're doing, rather than trying to make it sound like they're not just trying to override Bill C-69, as you say, Vashi, because that's the real truth behind everything.
So there's stuff happening at the provincial level as well, like this. In both Ontario, they have a similar piece of legislation which affords, basically the government there the ability to circumvent certain laws that are in place if they deem it, the economic imperative to exist. There's something like that going on in a little bit of a different way in BC. In Ontario, Sharon, I just want to play for you something that Doug Ford said today, the Premier of the province, about the opposition, about the pushback, essentially, particularly from Indigenous communities, and then I'll get your reaction.
This is like handing an opportunity on a silver platter to First Nations that by the way, I have treated like gold. But there's going to be a point that you can't just keep coming hat in hand all the time to the government. You got to be able to take care of yourselves. And when you literally have gold mines, nickel mines, every type of critical mineral that the world wants, and you're saying, no, I don't want to touch that. By the way, give me money. Not going to happen.
Sharon, what do you think?
I think he had an oopsie moment with what he meant to say there. I definitely understand what he was trying to get at. It was probably not the appropriate language to use. I think it's his frustration. So I would definitely caution around that type of tone and tenor towards Indigenous communities, because again, it's not helpful as part of our reconciliation process and how we educate ourselves. But what I will say is the frustration that Premier Ford has, it's not just a frustration that he has. We have to remember where a lot of this is coming from. A lot of this is coming from the fact that we've been going through this tumultuous period with the U.S., and we have realized that we as Canadians, as a country, need to operate as one economy, not 13 different economies. We need to build things here. We need to get things done quickly so that we and Canadians can take advantage of them. And I think the frustration he's voicing is what Canadians feel. I would not have used those words in that language necessarily. I think there's ways to communicate that without it being offensive. But I think we can all agree that we understand where the frustration is coming from.
I've just got a couple minutes left. Carl, your thoughts?
what we've got here is a recipe for civil unrest. Mark Carney is setting the stage for protests, for blockades, for demonstrations, for confrontations. That's what's going to happen with this kind of approach to governing. You need to get buy-in from these communities, and you won't get buy-in by pushing it down their throats. We've seen it before. It doesn't work. It leads to violence. It leads to suffering. We should not go down that path.
It happens anyways. We see the blockades anyways happening all the time. So why not at least do it in this way?
I've been
Are you going to
talking
send
with
the army like they do in the
Hannah,
States? Like,
yeah,
Okay, Hannah,
I've
you
been
go, and
talking
then
with
Jamie, last
Inuit.
word.
Yeah, with Inuit in the north. And one of the things is they want this type of development, but proper development going forward. I mean, I shouldn't be speaking on their behalf, but just the stories that I've been telling on the podcast is that they want to see this type of development, but they have to do it in the proper way. They have to respect the environment. They have to respect their beliefs, their ways of life. And that's an important part of it. So yes, they have to be involved in these decisions. But again, that's for them to speak to. I think those were very unfortunate comments made by Premier Ford.
Last word to you, Jamie.
Yeah, I think when you look at the debates and what's going to come forward here, I think it is incumbent upon media and anyone covering this to actually recognize that there is a very wide diversity of opinion amongst First Nations communities right across this country. And you don't get to point at the one group that happens to agree with your political position and say they represent everyone. And there are going to be some acrimonious debates and conversations ahead. But the reality is, I think Canadians writ large, including Indigenous Canadians, want to see prosperity, want to see our economy grow, and want the jobs that come with that, so that everyone's quality of life and standard of living increases. And there's ways we can do that responsibly using modern engineering and kind of have a yes and here's how, as opposed to an all or nothing approach, which has seen 20 years of very little get built in this country.
Okay, I got to leave it on that. No, great discussion. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you making the time. Our front bench, Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, Carl Belanger, and Hannah Thibodeau.